Welcome to the Greenroom, a new podcast series by Sustainable Buildings Canada designed to help the building industry stay informed about the latest trends and techniques for building more sustainable buildings. I'm Jeff Fredericks and I'm live at the 2022 Green Buildings Festival in downtown Toronto. Okay, great. Oskar, thanks so much for joining us today. Why don't we start with you telling us who you are and what you do.
So my name is Oskar Norelius. I'm an architect and a partner at White Arkitekter. I'm based in Stockholm. And I'm one of the directors in the Stockholm office and I work on projects. We mainly work on sustainable integrated design. So designing buildings, working a lot with developing new sustainable methods, both for materials and energy consumption in different parts of Scandinavia and the world.
I'd love to have you tell me about your mission statement because you shared that with us today of the firm and I thought that was pretty darn compelling. Why don't you just repeat that if you could?
Yeah, sure. Let's see if I remember it. Yeah. But for White, a couple of years ago we changed our vision. That is to for all our projects to be carbon neutral through design excellence by 2030.
Yeah.
And we're a pretty big practice. We have 800 employees working across different offices in Scandinavia, UK and Germany. So it's a real commitment for us to make that statement. And obviously we are very dependent on all of our collaborators, our clients, the builders. It's not something that we can do alone. So it's in a way it's the thing that we say, but it's also kind of generating a lot of traction. And a lot of our kind of clients and collaborators want to get on board on this trip with us.
I think it's a brilliant idea, and I suspect it also does a great job in helping you recruit some of the top talent and being right.
Yeah, absolutely.
For a firm like
absolutely.
Yours.
We've seen a surge in applications internationally to the firm these last years. That's been incredible.
Yeah.
I think it's almost difficult to recruit because we have so many applications to go through. It's a luxury, really.
Yeah.
But I think we hired 5 architects at one point last year. We had 1 recruitment and we had over 700 applicants.
That is
so
incredible.
It's been these sustainable projects are really generating an interest with a younger generation of architects that want to come work in a firm like ours. So.
It says a lot, doesn't it? It says a lot about how to differentiate a firm like yours, but also what people really care about these days, and what you guys stand for is obviously something that people care deeply about, so congratulations. Let's talk a little bit about the presentation that you did today, and it was on mass timber, of course, and I wanted to speak specifically about using mass timber as an option. There's a lot of these projects popping up all over the place, certainly here in Canada. A number of mass timber projects, each one claiming to be bigger than the next, and that seems to be a big part of the movement. From your experience, how much of that sort of race to be first is driving interest in this space?
It's driving a lot of interest, absolutely. I mean, when we set out to do this project, we didn't have a specific ambition with the client or for ourselves to be the tallest timber building realized, but the fact that we were in planning the first, and we were at realization as well, the first 20-story building realized in mass timber with the cores and everything in CLT, it's generated so much more interest. So it's been kind of a door opener for us. And then, as you may have noticed in the presentation, I don't really speak about the actual heights because that was not the goal of this project. The goal was to generate a culture center and a hotel that really functions in the city, and that's like an attraction. And an attractive space, and then with a minimal footprint. And then the fact that it's being high, obviously, has gotten us to many conferences, and we've been invited to many settings, so a lot of communication bonus points somehow.
Oh, for sure, and I guess it is a beacon in many ways of what's possible, right? I mean, in seeing your presentation today and seeing the way in which this building was designed, I love the way you spoke about one of the main objectives was making it sort of transparent, making it a public space, and the openness that's inherent in the building. Tell me a little bit about that partnership between public and private, and the idea of coming together in serving the greater good in the design of this building.
Yeah, I mean, it's really at the core, and it's quite interesting as well because I've been co-lead for this project with a colleague of mine, Robert Schmitz, and neither of us has worked specifically on timber projects before this. So we kind of based our design on our experience from large-scale, complex buildings, focusing on the human users, the integration into the urban realm as well. And then we added a layer of working with timber as well, because that's kind of our process and what we wanted to push. So instead of going from small-scale timber construction that many firms have done, scaling it up, we actually went from large-scale projects, transforming that into timber. And we've been really clear, both with the client and all of the stakeholders in this, that this is all about architecture and urban planning. It's not a demonstration of what can be done with timber. It's not a technical project trying to kind of push limits of numbers. It's a project that needs to function on its own within the cityscape. And doing it with timber has many benefits for the sustainability, but also for the integration of the project in the city where it's built, because they have this heritage of timber construction, they have the industries, they have the knowledge, so all of the jobs created through this has been like local. So it's been one of the keys of making this project local in a way. And then of course, working with a new material that has very different characteristics from concrete or steel, actually fulfilling the same criteria as a conventional construction method with the openness, the ability of kind of freeing up the facades from structural diagonal elements or other things that would obstruct that. That was kind of an added layer as well, that we said we don't want to make this worse integration with the city just because it's timber. It needs to function just as well as if it had been in conventional construction, but with the added benefits of timber. And that's what's going to drive the success of this project and make sure that it actually becomes realized, because we see a lot of visionary competitions in Sweden and in Europe that are launched but that do not actually end up being constructed.
Because they lack the utility in some respects, right?
Because it's not feasible,
yeah.
Or because it's a really good idea but you don't really have the connection to the actual kind of framework. And we won this in 2016.
Yeah.
It was finalized in 2021, so it's only a 5-year span.
Yeah.
And in 2016, the tallest timber building was, I can't even remember now, but it was 12 or 13 stories maybe. 14 actually, in Norway.
Yeah.
At that time. So saying that within 5 years' time, which is a short time for a project in Sweden, with zoning including everything, doing it 20 stories, it's been kind of incredible.
Yeah, it's really quite fascinating. I mean, I think when you look at working with this material, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that, because as you say, timber's been a big part of this city's heritage. And I guess the other thing is buildings have been made out of wood for thousands of years, I guess, right? I mean, it's not that it's a foreign product by any means. It's just that we're reimagining perhaps how we can use it. We've relied so heavily on the conventional concrete and steel approach to building, and here we are going back to something that frankly has been with us for some time. Tell me about the connection between timber and the city, because that's a very important part of this project, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it's important also to make the distinction that the historic construction with timber is obviously with logging or stick frame build. This is engineered timber, so in many ways it's very, very different in characteristics, in appearance as well. Even if the raw material is the same and the kind of the aspect when you're touching it, when you're in a space that's kind of built from this material is similar, working with it is completely different. It's a completely different set of knowledge than what you would have to do recreate a historic building somehow. So the transposition from the historic buildings that I also showed in the presentation to this it's a lot of years of development. So what I'm not showing, because it's not as picturesque maybe, is kind of the wood industry that's there today, and that there is an actual ongoing, and was at the time we won the competition, industry that are building modern buildings in timber, schools, parking garage, multifamily housing, but single use. So that's also a very big part of the actual heritage today.
Right.
In the time where modernity kind of hit Sweden, the city centers were kind of developed with buildings that were made from different materials. Right. So the city center basically doesn't have any timber buildings, or very few timber buildings today. So it's a heritage that exists in some historic parts that we're now bringing back in a completely new shape, obviously, because this doesn't look anything like that.
Right.
Into the city center, and it's new for many people to have timber in a city center, in an urban environment, having a timber facade. It's not something you're used to.
Oskar, I would love you to just bring us up to speed a little bit more about the sort of timeline of how this innovation with mass timber is taking place. I believe it's, as you've mentioned, only really 20 years since we've got to where we are today with the application.
Yeah, roughly 20 years. We've had cross-laminated timber, so the CLT that we're talking about as a wood product, engineered wood product, which has kind of expanded the possibilities of working only with mass timber from the glulam, which is traditionally post and beam construction. With CLT, we can also make the slabs, the shear walls, the cores, and this also helps stabilize the buildings without kind of adding concrete. So it's kind of it's the potential of replacing concrete in those elements as well. And that's fairly new as a material. And then this combined with the regulations in Europe and in Sweden notably, where you weren't allowed to build over 2 stories up until 1994. So those two came basically hand in hand, opening up this new possibilities. Yeah.
And I guess with that new possibility comes potentially a revolution of developers, choosing mass timber. Because I think you had asked the audience to ask you at the end, well, how much did it cost, was the big question, because of course that comes up all the time. But as you pointed out, in relative terms, it's somewhat on par, is that correct, with what a traditional building might cost?
It really depends on where you are and when you're asking, because initially working with timber, it was deemed more costly. Like the material costs more than the equivalent material of conventional construction. Obviously, most contractors weigh in a much more risk because they've never done it before, so everything that's an uncertainty in the construction business has a cost. So if you manage to work in a setup where you share those risks and kind of push the design forward, you have an opening, maybe an exit to not use the new innovations if it becomes too costly, then you can really reduce the cost as well. And then we really try to push all of our clients and collaborators to kind of zoom out a little bit in the budget, because timber actually has an effect on other parts than the actual construction budget. So the construction is much faster. You can get revenue faster. It also has an implication upstream with the material sourcing. If you can look into those aspects as well, it has an impact. And then these last years, with the prices going up and down for both timber and concrete, it's kind of been like this. So 1 month timber is much more expensive and everyone's switching to something else, and then the other month concrete is scarce and everyone's switching to timber. So this is a new landscape that we need to work in, kind of having an openness for different solutions. And I think this is quite beneficial for timber, because you can't really say that timber is more expensive today. It's really depending on the situation.
Great, and you made a great point about the associated benefits of using timber. Maybe we talk a little bit more about that, because in your presentation you talked about some of this work being constructed off-site, right? And that in itself produces great benefit. I guess even from a construction perspective, there's less noise on site, cleaner sites, less waste on site. Probably improves, I guess, quality of the construction itself when you're doing it off-site, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The quality is higher, and what we're also seeing that's quite interesting, and that we get the feedback from the industry, is that these new working environments also attract a completely new demographics into the construction industry. It's been very male-dominated in Sweden. I think that's the case globally. But these are conditions that are completely different from traditional or conventional construction sites. So we're seeing a completely different crowd coming in. I think that's a very positive thing as well for the social kind of cohesion of the society. Because construction, it's not just producing buildings where people live in. Construction is also an industry that employs a lot of people and has an impact on their lives. So it has many ramifications, the off-site production.
I hadn't even considered that point about diversifying the labor force, but boy, that's an amazing message, because you're right. Construction sites haven't been necessarily the friendliest of places to work, but yet when you move these assembly to better working conditions, you attract more diverse talent. So that's a great point. Last question is just about our two countries, Canada and Sweden, sharing in many ways some similarities, right, in terms of not just climate, but also if you take a look at BC, a lot of access to timber. In fact, I believe BC leads all of North America in terms of mass timber projects, both underway and completed, which is an amazing stat in its own right. What can you tell us about, in your mind, those similarities between our two countries when it comes to this resource?
So I think I have a limited knowledge of the Canadian landscape, I would start by saying, but I think yes, I mean we have abundant access to wood. I think from the experience that I have talking to people and professionals here, I think we have a rather similar approach to nature and kind of the respect for the resources. So I think that the sustainable forestry could potentially be developed in similar ways in both countries, and this obviously is a prerequisite to be working with sustainable timber construction. You need to source the timber in a sustainable way. I mean, we also have the hydropower available in many of the provinces in Canada that we're also reliant on in Sweden. So in that way, it's quite similar. Otherwise, I mean, we have different connections with the markets towards the European Union. In Sweden, for instance, where the prices of energy actually does get higher and higher, which seems to be not happening here as much. So there are other drivers, I guess. But yeah, I think that there's many touching points, both culturally and when it comes to resources, that would make these projects quite interesting to study from both countries.
Awesome.
And the project was actually part of a studio at the University of Toronto last semester.
Oh,
One of the topics of research, yeah.
Oh, really? That's
Yeah.
kind of cool to be featured in the curriculum. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. That's amazing. I guess the last question, just in terms of looking forward, Oskar, 2023 is just around the corner. And beyond, what are some of your high hopes for the next few years as it relates to this sustainability space?
So 2023, yeah, we're looking towards a rather difficult economy in Europe right now. We have a very difficult situation with inflation going up. I guess that's almost global now, yeah. But hopefully what we've seen historically is that all of these different crises also generate a big change. And an opportunity to do things differently once things open up again and once the capital is freed up for new projects. So I really hope that all of these kind of disturbances to the production, to the market, will generate a much faster development. We have very clear ambitions on the European level. We have the same ambitions locally in many communities, both in Europe, I think also in North America. Driving towards more sustainable development and connecting social inclusion and development together with the environmental aspects and of course the economy, tying everything together. There's many opportunities. So that's what I'm looking forward to 2023.
That sounds awesome. Thanks so much. It was
Thank
a pleasure.
you.
Great meeting you.
Thank you, you too.
All right, Oskar. Awesome.